Hey everyone. Let me kick things off with a little brag. I know, probably not the humblest way to start, but bear with me. I'm 40 years old, and in the last few months, I've been involved with not one, not two, but three stunning women. Who can honestly say they've pulled that off? And no, I'm not talking about some fling or a fantasy scenario. This was real, with each of them gorgeous, confident, and all part of the plan. Now, before you roll your eyes and think I'm just making stuff up, let me set the record straight. This wasn't about trying to prove I'm some hotshot or having some kind of midlife crisis. No, this was about revenge. Sweet, calculated revenge against my wife. Yep, you heard me right. This isn't one of those stories where I find some deep, life-changing enlightenment. Nope. This is raw, messy, and totally unapologetic. If you're wondering how this all unfolded, buckle up because it's a wild ride, and I'm not holding anything back. Let me take you back to where it all began. I'm just a regular guy. Nothing flashy, no millionaire lifestyle to brag about. I've been married for 11 years and been with her even longer. We've got 2 kids, a mortgage, and a pretty ordinary life. If you'd asked me before all this went down, I'd have said our marriage wasn't perfect, but it wasn't broken either. I thought we were solid, like a worn pair of shoes you've had for years. They're not new, but they still do the job. Turns out I was way off. I was completely blindsided that night. The one everything changed. It started like any other. I came home from work, exhausted but looking forward to a quiet evening. She cooked dinner, made something nice, like she was putting in a little extra effort. But there was this look on her face, like she had something heavy on her mind. I wasn't ready for the bomb she was about to drop. We sat down at the table. The kids were already asleep, and I dug into my meal like usual. But just as I started getting comfortable, she hit me with it. It wasn't the usual small talk about our day or work. No, she went straight into some heavy stuff about our marriage. Out of nowhere, she started talking about how things had become stagnant, like our marriage had lost its spark. Her words stung like little daggers, but I kept my cool. Don't get me wrong, I knew things weren't as exciting as when we first met. But that's normal, right? After 10 years, 2 kids, and full-time jobs, things slowed down. But I didn't think that meant it was over. To me, it just meant we needed to try harder. Marriage takes work, but apparently, I was the only one thinking that way. I sat there, listening to her go on and on about how bored she was, how our lives had become so predictable. I was still chewing my food when she dropped the real bomb. She said she wanted to open up our relationship. I froze. The food in my mouth felt like rubber. I couldn't taste a damn thing. I kept my face as neutral as I could, but inside, I was screaming. I expected her to suggest counseling, or maybe even talk about spicing things up, or hell, even consider separation. But this I didn't see coming. She kept going, totally unaware of the anger brewing inside me. I don't see it as cheating, she said, like she was talking about trying a new diet for a week. We both need some space, some freedom. Freedom? The nerve. She was sitting there, practically pitching me this idea about how she could sleep with someone else without any guilt. And the way she said it, it was like no big deal, just a normal thing couples do when things get tough. She wanted to have her cake and eat it too. Keep the security of marriage, but also play around without consequences. I didn't say a word. I just kept eating, chewing slowly, nodding now, and then like I was considering her proposal. In reality, I was fighting the urge to flip the table and walk out. But something clicked as she went on, justifying how this would improve our marriage. I realized something in that moment. It was already over. Our marriage was a dead thing, and she just hadn't admitted it yet. When your wife asks for an open relationship, it's done. She's already checked out emotionally, mentally, probably physically too. What she was really asking for wasn't a break. It was permission to be with someone else. I could feel it. Some guy was already in her head, or worse, in her bed, and she was trying to make it sound okay. Instead of blowing up, instead of confronting her right there, I stayed calm. I agreed. Yeah, I agreed to her ridiculous plan. Why? Because I knew I could play the long game. She thought she had won. Thought she had just given herself a free pass to mess around while I stayed home like some clueless fool. But what she didn't know was that I had plans of my own. If she wanted an open relationship, fine. I'd let her think she was in control. But I'd get my revenge in ways she couldn't even imagine. So yeah, I agreed. I smiled. took another bite of my tasteless meal, and said, "You know what? Maybe you're right." And that's how it all started. That night, after our little dinner chat about the open relationship, I couldn't sleep. She was next to me, passed out, wearing her earplugs and that stupid eye mask she swears helps her sleep. I had to laugh a little. She thought she was being so slick, but she had no clue what I was about to do. We used to be totally open with each other. Phones, passwords, all of it. So when I slipped my hand under her pillow to grab her phone, I hoped she hadn't changed the password. Took a deep breath, typed in the code, and boom, it opened. A weird rush of excitement and anger hit me all at once. She thought I wouldn't catch on. The first thing I did was check her messages. I won't lie, I was shaking a little. My heart was pounding. I had no idea what I was about to find, but it didn't take long to discover I was right. Right there, in the middle of her chat app, was the guy she was planning to cheat with, a typical pretty boy with a cocky profile pic. I could tell right away. He probably thought he'd hit the jackpot, getting some easy, no-strings-attached fun with my wife. And the messages? Let's just say, if she hadn't physically cheated yet, it was only a matter of time. The way they were talking, the way she responded, it was obvious she had already checked out. Mentally, at least. Honestly, though, does it even matter if she hasn't physically gone there yet? Betrayal is betrayal. And to me, emotional cheating is just as bad as the real thing. And judging by the photos, the flirty emojis, yeah, it wasn't going to stay emotional for long. I took screenshots. I saved his Instagram profile. I sent everything to myself, just in case. By the time I was done, I had enough evidence to make sure this whole thing came crashing down. But I wasn't ready to blow everything up just yet. I had to think this through carefully. I needed to be smart about this. So, what did I do? I called in reinforcements. I rang up a couple of my buddies. I knew they'd be pissed. Hell, it was the middle of the night. But I couldn't wait. I needed them in on this. I needed them to understand what I was planning and get on board, no questions asked. One by one, I woke them up and told them to meet me at the park. No need for explanations. Just show up. By the time we all gathered, it was probably around 1 or 2 a.m. The park was empty, just the faint hum of streetlights cutting through the darkness. I could see them a little confused, maybe even annoyed, but the second they saw the look on my face, they knew something serious was going down. "What's going on, man?" one of them asked, still rubbing his eyes. I didn't beat around the bush. I laid it all out for them. What had happened at dinner, her proposal for an open relationship, the messages I'd found. At first, they didn't say much, just stood there taking it all in. But I could see it. The shock was still there, but it was turning into something else. When I showed them the screenshots, their faces said it all. They were pissed. One of them finally spoke up. "So, what are you going to do about it?" I told them my plan. It wasn't fully formed yet, but I had the basics in place. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her walk away with the upper hand. I needed to make sure that when everything came to light, I was the one holding all the cards, not her. But to make that happen, I needed their help. At first, they thought I was out of my mind. I could tell by the look on their faces. They were all processing what I was asking. It was risky. It was bold. But after a few more minutes of discussing, and after tweaking the plan a bit, they agreed. We were all on the same page now. We couldn't just sit around. This had to be handled quickly and with precision. No playing it safe. By the time we left the park, I had this odd mixture of relief and anxiety in my gut. On one hand, I was ready. The plan was in motion, and I had my friends backing me up. On the other hand, I knew there was no turning back. What I was about to do would change everything, and there would be no room for second-guessing. When I got back home, I slipped quietly into bed next to her. She was fast asleep, her earplugs in, and that stupid eye mask over her face like usual. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The fear started to creep in. What if I messed up? What if she found out what I was planning before I could execute it? But then I thought about the messages, the way she had been so smug, so carefree, and the fear melted away. This needed to happen. It had to happen. When the first light of morning slipped through the blinds, I was already awake, wide-eyed, my mind still running a mile a minute. I couldn't sit on this any longer. The night's revelations were still fresh in my head, and I wasn't going to sit around pretending to be the clueless husband anymore. I needed to make my move, and I needed to do it now. Without a second thought, I grabbed my phone and called a divorce lawyer. It didn't matter that it was early. If this guy was as good as his reviews claimed, he'd understand why I was calling at the crack of dawn. When he picked up, I didn't waste any time with small talk. "I want to file for divorce," I said, my voice sharp and direct. "My wife is cheating on me, and I need to get the paperwork started as soon as possible." There was a pause on the other end. Maybe he was surprised at how straightforward I was. But either way, he quickly shifted gears, asking for the necessary details and explaining the steps ahead. He mentioned something about gathering evidence, but I cut him off. "Don't worry about that," I told him. "I've already got everything I need." He set up an appointment for that afternoon to start the paperwork. When I hung up, a wave of adrenaline hit me. This was real now. I wasn't just some guy catching his wife in an emotional affair anymore. I was about to end a marriage. And as much as it stung, I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not now, not ever. While I was locking down the legal side, my plan was already moving forward. This wasn't just about a divorce. If all I wanted was to end things, I could have packed my bags and left. No, this was about revenge. I wasn't going to let her waltz away from this unscathed. My friends had already tracked down the guy she was planning to cheat with. It wasn't hard. His Instagram was wide open, filled with posts showing off his fake, wannabe influencer lifestyle. Expensive watches, flashy cars, pictures with models who probably didn't even know his name. Classic narcissistic loser, trying to make himself look more important than he really was. And when my friends confronted him, he folded. I figured there might be some resistance, maybe even a little back and forth, but nope. This guy was nothing but a spineless coward. I didn't even need to be there. He gave up everything without hesitation. Apparently, he wasn't as bold in person as he was behind a screen. "I swear, man, I didn't know she was married," he blurted, probably hoping to talk his way out of it. My friends didn't even raise their voices. They told him exactly what was going on, that he was caught in something much bigger than he realized, and he practically begged them for a way out. The guy knew when he'd been outmatched. He didn't try to make excuses or run away. He realized quickly that messing around with a married woman wasn't just going to cause a few ripples. It was going to wreck everything for him if he didn't play his cards right. So I gave him a choice. He could disappear from her life completely, never to reach out again, or he could step into my world and help me out. I wasn't looking to hurt the guy, at least not physically. Sure, I was furious, but this wasn't about making him suffer. It was about her. If she had kept her hands to herself, this guy wouldn't even have been part of the equation. So instead of directing all my energy toward punishing him, I turned him into an asset. From that moment on, he wasn't just some guy messing with my marriage. He was a tool, a means to an end. Every move he and my wife made, I knew about it. Every message they exchanged, I had it saved. My friends kept a close watch on him, and he kept feeding me information. I made it crystal clear. If he even thought about warning her, he would regret it. And, just like that, he went from being a nuisance to my inside man. He became my informant. Every secret rendezvous, every plan they cooked up, it came right back to me. No more hiding. He wasn't doing this out of loyalty to me, of course. He was just looking to save his own skin. And that's exactly how I needed it. In return for feeding me information, I let him keep his life somewhat intact, his reputation as untouched as possible. Then came the day she thought she was being clever. The day she thought she was getting away with sneaking off for the weekend. It was a Friday morning when she dropped the bomb. Over breakfast, like it was just another casual conversation, she told me she'd be heading to her parents' house for a few days. I could see right through her act, the way she tried to sound nonchalant about it, as if it was just another trip. But I knew exactly where she was going. "I'm going to visit my parents this weekend," she said, taking another sip of her coffee like it was no big deal. I just smiled and played my part, like the clueless husband she thought I was. "Oh, that's nice," I said, fighting back a smirk. I didn't let on for a second that I saw right through it. "Give them my regards," I added, trying not to laugh. She smiled back, thinking she'd pulled one over on me. She probably thought she could go off and do whatever she pleased while I stayed at home, the unsuspecting fool. But inside, I was already starting the next phase of my plan. The moment she left, it was game time. It was time to switch gears from defense to offense. This wasn't about sitting back and taking it anymore. This was my move. The second the door clicked shut behind her, my heart was racing, not with fear, but with excitement. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was calling the shots. I grabbed my phone, shot a quick message to my friends, and told them it was time. A half hour later, they pulled up outside. Booze, loud laughter, and 3 girls in their 20s who were ready to bring the kind of energy I hadn't seen in ages. The atmosphere in the house shifted instantly. Like a light flipping on, we didn't waste a second. The drinks flowed freely, and before long, the noise in the house was louder. The alcohol did its thing, and soon we were all laughing, throwing back shots, and toasting to the dumbest things we could think of. It felt almost unreal. These girls brought a kind of chaos I hadn't felt in years, wild, carefree, and full of energy. They were flirty, they were fun, and they didn't care about anything but enjoying the moment. The more we drank, the lighter everything seemed. All the stress, all the weight of what I'd been dealing with began to fade. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I felt a thrill that was hard to ignore. I knew something my wife didn't. Her little boyfriend wasn't showing up. He had blocked her, probably too scared of what would happen if things went south. I had set that up myself. He was just a puppet, and he didn't even know it. While she thought she was heading off for a romantic weekend, I knew she'd be turning back sooner or later, angry and humiliated when she realized he had ghosted her. She was going to come crawling back. But until then, I was going to make the most of the time I had. The girls, tipsy and laughing, suggested we take the party upstairs. The atmosphere shifted again, playful, charged. And with every shot I took, I could feel myself letting go of everything. Why not? This was my revenge, and she never saw it coming. Upstairs, one of the girls grabbed my arm, leading me to the next room like we were caught up in the excitement. The atmosphere was charged, and things quickly became more intense. The girls were laughing, enjoying themselves, as if they were having the time of their lives. And before I knew it, I was joining them. Piece by piece, it all started to unravel. It was surreal. The warmth of the alcohol, the rush of the moment. It felt like a kind of freedom I hadn't allowed myself before. For years, I'd been the loyal husband, the hard-working provider. But now I was letting go. I wasn't the dependable guy anymore. I was just living in the moment, and the feeling of revenge was burning hotter with every passing second. I was lost in it. I wasn't thinking about anything but the rush, the thrill of the moment. The 3 girls, full of energy and laughter, brought an electric vibe to the night, making everything feel alive and unpredictable. I won't lie, this was exhilarating. The kind of rush that makes you forget about everything else. The heat of the moment, the feeling of it all. And then, just when I thought I couldn't get more caught up in it, I heard it. Her voice, slicing through the haze. "What the hell is going on here?" she screamed. I didn't hear the front door open, didn't hear her come up the stairs. But there she was, standing in the doorway. Her face a mix of shock, disbelief, and pure rage. She looked around the room. At me, in bed with 3 half-naked women. The room reeking of booze and bad decisions. For a second, I just paused, long enough to turn toward her, giving her the biggest, most sarcastic smile I could muster. "Oh, this?" I said, dripping with mockery. "It's just an open relationship, sweetheart. You know, like you wanted. By the way, how's your weekend with your parents going?" Her face went from red to pale in an instant. I saw the realization hit her. She knew. She knew I had set this whole thing up, and the fact that I had flipped the script on her so completely, it broke her. I could see it in her eyes, the way she lost it, consumed by rage. She stormed toward the bed, tearing the girls away from me one by one. Her hands trembled with fury as she tossed their clothes at them, shouting for them to get out. The girls, giggling and stumbling from too much alcohol, didn't even try to resist. They quickly grabbed their things and left, half-dressed, their laughter echoing as they tumbled down the stairs and out the door. It was just a wild night that got way out of hand once the girls were gone. She crumpled onto the edge of the bed, hands covering her face as the sobs began. No soft, quiet crying here. This was full-on, ugly, gut-wrenching sobbing, the kind that makes your whole body shake. She was a mess, completely falling apart, unable to control it. But honestly, I didn't care. I took my time getting dressed, no hurry at all. She was sitting there, falling apart next to me, and I just went about it calmly, buttoning my shirt, adjusting my belt. When I was done, I sat beside her on the bed, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. She'd done this. She had pushed us to this point, and now she was paying the price. "How was your day?" I asked, almost casual. She looked up at me, eyes swollen and red from crying, tears still rolling down her cheeks. That's when it hit her. The realization slammed into her that I had orchestrated all of this. She knew it was me. She knew I had planned the whole thing. She didn't have to say a word. The look in her eyes told me everything. She opened her mouth to speak, but I stopped her. "Don't bother," I said, my voice calm, yet firm. "A lawyer's going to call you tomorrow. We're done. I'm filing for divorce." I stood up, giving her one last look. There's no point in arguing or yelling. It won't change anything. What's done is done. With that, I walked out, leaving her to cry. No more fights. No more drama. I was done. She'd made her bed, and now she had a lie in it. The next day, after everything had happened, I knew I needed to talk it over with my friends. We'd been through a lot together, but this was on a whole new level. I sent a text in the morning, and they all agreed to meet up at our usual spot, the local bar where we'd spent countless nights swapping stories and shooting the breeze. But today, I was the one with a story to tell. When I walked into the bar, they were already there, sitting around our usual table, beers in hand, grinning like they already knew what was coming. As soon as I sat down, one of them leaned forward and said, "All right, man, we've been dying to hear how it went down. Don't leave out a single detail." I didn't need any more encouragement. I launched into it, from the moment my wife left the house, thinking she was off to see her lover, to the moment I found out that guy had blocked her, and she had to come home to a surprise she never saw coming. My friends were all ears, laughing and shaking their heads in disbelief as I laid out the chaos in the bedroom, booze, girls, and of course, the grand finale, my wife walking in on me in the middle of it all. Wait. One of my buddies interrupted, barely able to contain his laughter. She just walks in and you're like, "Oh hey, it's a free relationship, man. That's cool." I couldn't help but laugh too. Yeah, pretty much. She froze at first, didn't know what to do, then lost it completely. Started screaming and throwing the girls out like she hadn't suggested an open relationship just a few days earlier. Another friend, shaking his head in disbelief, took a swig of his beer. "Damn, dude, you pulled that off perfectly. I'd have paid good money to see that." The laughter kept rolling as I continued, explaining how she cried on the bed after kicking the girls out, completely shattered, and how I, without any drama, told her that a lawyer would be in touch about the divorce the next day. One of the quieter guys at the table leaned back, smirking. "You know, I've got to say, I envy you a little, 3 girls at once, and she had to walk in and see it. That's the ultimate revenge." I shook my head, still grinning. Yeah, it was definitely something. But honestly, I wasn't even doing it for revenge. It wasn't about that. It was about showing her she wasn't in control anymore. She couldn't pull the strings. There was a brief pause at the table as they absorbed what I said. Revenge had been part of it, sure, but the bigger part was about reclaiming my dignity after she'd shredded it with her lies and betrayal. I raised my glass, meeting each of their eyes. "I've got to thank you guys. Seriously. You've had my back through this whole thing. Without you, I don't know how I'd have handled it. Everyone deserves friends like you." They clinked their glasses with mine, and for a moment, there was a quiet sense of solidarity. These guys had been with me through thick and thin, and I wouldn't have made it through this mess without them. We finished our beers, and I started talking about the divorce process. The crazy part? The divorce wasn't even that dramatic. After everything that went down, I think my ex just realized there was no fight left in her. She knew she'd lost, and dragging it out wasn't going to change anything. One of them raised an eyebrow. "No screaming matches or last-minute drama?" I shook my head. "No." It was surprisingly calm. We divided everything pretty evenly. I wasn't trying to take everything from her. What's the point? It wasn't worth the hassle. The house, the cars, everything got split without much argument. I think she was just too tired to fight anymore. And honestly, I didn't have the energy for it either. They all nodded. They understood. We'd all seen or heard about divorces that dragged on for years, with both sides trying to tear each other apart. But in my case, It felt like we both knew the game was over. There was no use pretending anymore. She signed the papers, and that was it. So what now? One of my friends asked, leaning forward. You've got your freedom back. What are you going to do with it? I smiled, though there was a trace of weariness behind it. I don't know, man. I'm just focusing on moving forward. I've spent enough time looking back, trying to figure out where things went wrong. I think it's time to just let it go and start fresh. We spent the rest of the night drinking, laughing, and telling stories, but by the time I left the bar, the weight of everything that had happened lingered. I felt lighter than I had in years. There was a sense of closure, of finally putting an end to a chapter of my life that had been dragging on far too long. And now, if you're still with me, I want to thank you for sticking around. I know this isn't easy to read, and I'm sure it's tough for some of you to hear. But I need you to know, no matter how messy things get, there's always a way out. I've learned that the hard way, and if there's one thing I want to share with you, it's this. Don't ignore the warning signs. We all get comfortable, but comfort can blind you. Take a good, hard look at your spouse, at your life. Don't wait until things fall apart to start noticing. And if they do, don't just sit back and accept it. You got to take control. Trust me, you don't want to end up like I did, finding out the truth the hard way. So here's my update. It's been a little over a year now since everything went down, and I figured it's time to let you know where I'm at. Looking back, it's almost surreal how much has changed. When you're living in the middle of chaos, it feels like the world is falling apart. But now, it feels like things are finally coming together in ways I never could have expected. First things first, the divorce, it's done. Over. And looking back, it was the best choice I could have made. I don't regret it for a second. The process was surprisingly painless, especially considering how ugly it could have gotten. I've heard nightmare stories about divorces that drag on for years, with endless court dates and fighting over every last thing. But in my case, after that final confrontation, she just didn't have the fight left in her. Maybe she realized there was no point. Or maybe, just maybe, she was ready to let go too. Either way, we split the house, the cars, the money, and that was it. Clean break. I got what I needed, and she got exactly what she deserved. Now let's talk about what really matters. Life after the storm. It's been a roller coaster, but in the best possible way. After the divorce, I made a conscious decision to focus on myself for the first time in forever. And no, I don't just mean hitting the gym, though yeah, I did that too. It's amazing what a little freedom and the right kind of motivation can do for your health. I shed a few pounds, put on some muscle, and I'm honestly in the best shape I've been in for a long time. But honestly, that's just the surface. The real transformation happened inside. For the first time in ages, I started asking myself some real questions. What do I really want out of life? What do I want my future to look like now that I'm not tethered to a toxic relationship? It wasn't easy, and I won't lie. It took time to figure it out. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. One of the biggest surprises was my career. I threw myself into work, but not just to keep busy. It was my way of reinventing myself. The funny thing is, as soon as I stopped holding back, started taking some risks, doors opened. I've been toying with the idea of a side business for a while, something tech-related, but I never had the guts to make it happen. I won't bore you with all the details, but after the divorce, I took the plunge. I started putting in the time, the energy, the effort. It wasn't easy. There were plenty of late nights and moments of doubt, wondering if I was just wasting my time. But slowly, bit by bit, things started clicking. I built a team, found some investors, and before I knew it, the business was gaining traction. A year later, we're not just surviving, we're thriving. I'm not saying I'm rolling in cash or anything, but the success I've had, it's been fulfilling in a way I can't even describe. I've even gotten a bit of local recognition in business news. Nothing big, but it felt good to see my hard work pay off. And the best part? I'm doing this on my own terms. No one to answer to but myself. That's a feeling I never thought I'd experience, especially after being stuck in a marriage that was so suffocating. On the personal front, things have been good, better than I could have imagined. I've reconnected with old friends, made some new ones, and most importantly, I've learned to enjoy my own company again. After the divorce, I purposely stayed single for a while. I wasn't looking for anything serious. I needed time to heal, to figure out who I was without the weight of a relationship dragging me down. But eventually someone came along, just as these things do. We met through mutual friends, no expectations, no plans, and we just clicked. She's smart, funny, independent. Everything I didn't even know I was looking for. The best part? She's not trying to change me or ask anything from me. Just honesty, just a good time. No drama, no baggage. It's been a breath of fresh air. I'm taking it slow this time, not rushing into anything because I'm not in a hurry. But for the first time in a long time, I actually feel hopeful about where things could go. As for my ex, from what I've heard, things haven't exactly gone the way she planned. She's had a few relationships since we split, but none of them have stuck. I don't wish her any ill will, though. Well, not anymore. I'm past that stage. If anything, I just hope she figures out what she's really looking for. But honestly, I don't think she ever will. People like her rarely do. Looking back, it's crazy to think how much has changed in just over a year. If you told me back then that I'd be running a business, in great shape, and dating someone new, I wouldn't have believed you. But here I am. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that sometimes you have to lose everything in order to find yourself. To anyone reading this, especially if you're going through something similar, just know that it gets better. I know it might seem like you'll never get through it, but trust me, you will. Just hang in there. Take control of your life and don't be afraid to make the tough calls when it matters. So yeah, I guess you could say life's looking pretty damn good right now, and I'm planning to keep it that way.